Sometimes the greatest moments of transformation begin in the most painful places. You might be standing in a season where nothing makes sense, where every effort you make seems to dissolve into frustration, where the people you relied on are gone, and where your faith feels thinner than the air you're trying to breathe. And yet, paradoxically, this is often where real life begins. The purpose behind your pain is not always visible at first. It hides behind confusion, behind loss, behind those long nights of questioning whether any of this matters. But you see, pain has a peculiar kind of intelligence. It knows how to reveal what comfort conceals. It knows how to expose the weakness you've ignored, the complacency you've tolerated, and the strength you never realized you had. Every person who has ever achieved something of substance has walked through the furnace of suffering. You don't get resilience by reading about it. You earn it by being pushed to the edge of yourself again and again. Pain is the price of growth. It dismantles illusions and forces you to confront reality. It strips away your pretenses and leaves you naked in front of truth. And in that raw, vulnerable space, something remarkable happens. You start to see what you're actually made of. The same pain that threatened to destroy you becomes the hammer that forges your character. When life breaks you open, it's not always punishment, it's preparation. You've been praying for strength, but strength doesn't appear wrapped in comfort. It comes disguised as challenge. You've asked for wisdom, but wisdom doesn't grow in calm waters. It's born in storms. And you've begged for purpose. But purpose doesn't reveal itself until everything else that distracted you has been stripped away. The purpose behind your pain isn't to make you suffer. It's to make you see, to wake you up from the slumber of ordinary existence, to force you into a confrontation with yourself. Because it's in those moments of raw honesty that you discover who you really are, and more importantly, who you could be. You have to understand that nothing in life is random. Every tear you've cried, every failure you've endured, every door that's been slammed in your face, these aren't accidents. They're coordinates on a map that's leading you somewhere higher. But here's the challenge. When you're in the middle of the storm, you don't see the map. You see chaos, you see pain, you see uncertainty, and your mind screams for control, because that's what human beings do. We want to make sense of everything. We want certainty, but growth doesn't happen in certainty. It happens when you're stripped of control and forced to walk forward anyway. That's where faith comes in. Not blind belief, but disciplined trust. Faith is what allows you to keep walking when your eyes can't see the destination. It's what gives you the courage to stand in the dark and still declare, this is not the end of my story, because it's not. The purpose behind your pain is never destruction. It's transformation. And the first step to transformation is refusing to let your suffering make you bitter. Pain can harden you, or it can refine you. It can make you cynical, or it can make you wise. The choice is yours. When you begin to view pain as a teacher rather than an enemy, everything changes. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what is this trying to teach me? That question alone shifts your perspective from victimhood to empowerment. It pulls you out of the pit of self-pity and places you on the path of growth. Because pain at its core is information. It's feedback from life. It tells you what's working, what's not, what's broken, what's ready to evolve. And once you start listening to that feedback, instead of resenting it, you start to change. But here's the paradox. Even though pain teaches, most people run from it. We live in a world obsessed with comfort, a culture that numbs itself at the first sign of discomfort. But avoidance doesn't heal you. It delays your healing. You can't outrun your pain. You can only outgrow it. And growth requires you to face it, to sit in it, to let it speak. Because the truth is, the very thing you're avoiding might be the key to your next level of understanding. If you never face the pain, you'll never find the power hidden within it. Now, when we talk about faith over fear, we're not talking about a shallow optimism that pretends everything is fine. Faith is not denial, it's defiance. It's the refusal to let fear dictate your decisions, even when the evidence around you screams otherwise. Faith is not ignoring reality. It's remembering that reality is not complete without God's involvement. It's standing in the ruins of what once was and believing that something better can still emerge. Fear is loud. It shouts, it distorts, it exaggerates. It tells you that your failure is final, that your pain is permanent, that your best days are behind you. And if you listen to that voice long enough, it will paralyze you. But faith speaks in whispers. It's that quiet conviction that something greater is at work, even if you can't see it yet. It's what keeps you moving when every logical reason says stop. You have to understand that fear and faith both require belief. They both demand that you trust in something you cannot see. The difference is the direction of your belief. Fear believes in the worst possible outcome. Faith believes in the best. Fear says, what if everything goes wrong? Faith says, what if everything goes right? Fear fixates on loss. Faith focuses on purpose. And when you learn to feed your faith instead of your fear, your reality begins to shift. But faith doesn't mean passivity. It's not sitting back and hoping things magically change. Real faith is active. It's choosing to show up even when you feel unqualified. It's doing your best even when the results are invisible. It's holding the line when quitting would be easier. Faith is not a feeling, it's a discipline. You don't wait for faith to feel strong. You exercise it until it becomes strong. That's the difference between people who rise after failure and those who stay stuck in it. The ones who rise have learned to anchor their trust in something deeper than circumstance. They've learned to say, I may not understand this season, but I trust that it's shaping me for something beyond my current comprehension. That's not naive, that's strength. That's what allows a person to stand in uncertainty and still move forward. So when you're in pain, don't rush to escape it. Lean into it, learn from it, ask it questions, let it humble you and refine you. Let it strip away your illusions and force you to face what's real. Because if you let it, your pain will become your power, your suffering will become your wisdom, and your faith will become unshakable. And when fear tries to whisper that you're finished, remind yourself that fear is always loudest right before your breakthrough. It's the final defense of the old life trying to stop you from entering the new one. Don't listen. Keep walking, keep trusting, because the purpose behind your pain is awakening your faith, and that faith, when it matures, becomes the engine that drives transformation. Everything you've gone through was never meant to break you. It was meant to build something indestructible within you. The pain was the invitation, the fear was the test, and the faith was the answer. And if you're standing in the middle of that process right now, understand this, the story isn't over. The turnaround hasn't yet revealed itself, but it's coming. Because faith doesn't end in defeat, it ends in revelation. And the revelation that's about to emerge from your pain will make every tear, every struggle, and every moment of fear worth it. There's a moment in everyone's life when you realize that control is an illusion. You plan, you prepare, you analyze every variable, you think you've got it all figured out, and then life throws you into a storm that no amount of strategy can navigate. And it's in that moment, when the weight of uncertainty presses against your chest, that you come face to face with the truth. You were never really in control. Not of the timing, not of the outcomes, not of the path. And yet this realization, as humbling as it is, isn't a loss, it's liberation. Because the moment you let go of your desperate need to control everything, you create space for something greater to move through you. That's what surrender is. It's not resignation, it's not weakness, it's the courageous act of releasing your grip on what was never yours to hold. People often misunderstand surrender. They think it means giving up. They think it's passivity, apathy, a kind of defeat. But surrender, real surrender, is not about quitting, it's about aligning. It's the shift from I must force this to I will trust this. It's the awareness that your limited perspective cannot possibly contain the infinite complexity of existence. You might think you know what's best for you, but how many times have you gotten exactly what you wanted, only to discover it wasn't what you needed? How many times did a door close that you fought to pry open, only for you to later realize that what waited behind it would have destroyed you? When you surrender, you stop fighting life and you start cooperating with it. You stop resisting reality and you begin to flow with it. And ironically, that's when real power begins to emerge. Not the kind of power that controls, but the kind that transcends control. You stop trying to manipulate outcomes, and instead you begin to cultivate yourself. You stop obsessing over when and start focusing on who you're becoming in the process, who you're learning to be when nothing goes according to plan. Because that's the essence of transformation. But surrender doesn't come easily, especially in a world that glorifies control. We're taught from childhood that we should have everything planned, that success means mastery over our environment, that uncertainty is failure. We schedule every hour, strategize every move, and measure every outcome. Yet, despite all that, anxiety rises, burnout spreads, and the sense of fulfillment remains elusive. Why? Because control without trust is tyranny. When you try to dominate life instead of collaborating with it, you cut yourself off from the mystery that makes it meaningful. You see, life is not a problem to be solved. It's a process to be participated in. And surrender is participation at its highest level. It's saying, I will do my part, but I will also trust that there are forces working beyond my sight, weaving meaning into the chaos. The most extraordinary things in your life will often come not from what you planned, but from what you never expected. And those moments require space. They require openness. Surrender creates that openness. Now, there's a connection between surrender and timing that people often overlook. The timing of your life is sacred. It's not random. Everything unfolds according to a rhythm far more intelligent than your impatience will ever comprehend. You think you're waiting, but what if life is waiting for you? What if the reason things haven't moved yet is not because they're being withheld, but because you're still being shaped? What if the delay is not punishment, but protection? You see, when you demand something before you're ready, you risk losing it just as quickly as you gain it. Think about it. You don't give a child a weapon, even if they ask for it with sincerity, because they're not yet equipped to handle its responsibility. The same principle applies to life. The things you've been praying for, striving for, may very well be in your future, but you might not yet be strong enough, wise enough, or disciplined enough to sustain them. And that's not condemnation, that's compassion. Timing is not only about readiness of circumstance, it's about readiness of character. When you start to understand divine timing, your anxiety begins to quiet. You realize that forcing something before its time can ruin what was meant to bless you. You begin to notice that life has its seasons: sowing, waiting, harvesting. And in the waiting season, you are not abandoned, you are being cultivated. Waiting is not inactivity, it's internal construction. It's the season where you build the roots deep enough to sustain the weight of what's coming. But most people despise waiting because they mistake it for stagnation. They think, if I'm not moving, I'm failing. But growth isn't always visible. A seed doesn't look alive while it's underground. But that's where all the life begins. That's how timing works. What you call delay might be your gestation period. The work that's happening beneath the surface is often more important than what appears above it. You want to see results, but God wants to build resilience. You want speed, but life demands stability. You want the fruit, but life is still strengthening the roots. And so the waiting becomes sacred. It becomes the space where surrender and faith meet. Because faith without patience collapses under pressure, and patience without surrender turns into resentment. When you can trust the timing of your life, you begin to experience a different kind of peace. You stop comparing your timeline to others. You stop envying those who seem ahead. You realize that what's meant for you cannot be taken, and what's not meant for you cannot stay. You stop chasing outcomes and start chasing alignment. And that's the irony. When you stop running after what you think you want, life brings you what you truly need, because now you're ready. Now you've surrendered your limited understanding and you've made room for divine wisdom to lead. But this doesn't mean you sit back and wait idly. Surrender doesn't mean inactivity. It means intelligent cooperation with life. You still show up, you still work, you still strive for excellence, but you do it with peace rather than panic. You act from faith, not fear. You do your best and let go of the rest. And that balance of effort and trust is where transformation happens. It's not easy to trust timing when your ego screams for certainty. The human mind wants control. It wants to know the when, the how, the why. But the truth is, you don't need to know everything to move forward. You don't need to understand every delay to believe that something meaningful is taking place. The same way you trust that the sun will rise after the night, you must learn to trust that after your darkness, light will come. When you live with that kind of faith, surrender becomes strength. Timing becomes an ally. You begin to see that life's pauses are not empty, they're full of preparation. You start to notice patterns, connections, synchronicities, the very things that once frustrated, you begin to make sense in hindsight. You see how what you thought was a setback was actually positioning you for something greater. And in that realization, gratitude takes root where bitterness once grew. So surrender, not because you've lost, but because you've learned. Trust the timing, not because you understand it, but because you know that understanding often comes after faith, not before it. Let go of the illusion that you're behind or that you're forgotten. You are precisely where you need to be for the next step of your evolution. The clock you're watching isn't divine, it's human. And divine timing does not bow to human impatience. When you truly grasp this, the tension between effort and peace dissolves. You can work hard and still rest internally. You can strive without striving. You can move forward without forcing the pace, because now you understand that surrender is not the end of action, it's the beginning of alignment. And alignment with divine timing is where ordinary lives become extraordinary stories of transformation, not through control, but through trust that what's unfolding, no matter how uncertain it looks, is moving exactly as it should. Pressure has a strange way of revealing truth. You can pretend to be calm when life is stable. You can appear confident when things go your way. And you can speak of faith when the winds are gentle. But when the storm hits, all pretenses are stripped away, and what's left is who you really are. That's what transformation through trials is about. Life tests you, not because it wants to see you break, but because it wants to show you what you are made of. It exposes the false layers, the borrowed beliefs, the fragile masks, and forces you to meet the part of yourself that's raw, real, and resilient. It's in that space between who you were and who you must become that transformation begins. Every challenge that enters your life carries within it a question: who will you be because of this? Not what you will achieve, not what you will lose or gain, but who you will become. That's the question trials always ask. You see, life doesn't just give you pain, it gives you the opportunity to be forged by it. Fire is frightening, but it's also the only way to purify gold. Diamonds are formed under unbearable pressure. Trees with deep roots are those that have endured storms. And human beings, those who truly awaken, are shaped by adversity. It's through difficulty that we stop living reactively and start living consciously. But here's the paradox. People often pray for strength, but then reject the very situations that would make them strong. They want wisdom, but they avoid the experiences that require discernment. They want patience, but they resist waiting. They want courage, but they run from fear. You cannot develop virtues in theory. They are born in tension. The friction of life is what builds the soul's muscle. Every struggle has the potential to make you either more conscious or more bitter, more awake or more numb. The difference lies in your response. The moment you stop seeing challenges as punishments and start recognizing them as preparation, something shifts inside you. You begin to realize that transformation isn't about escaping pain. It's about integrating it. It's about allowing what was meant for harm to become the catalyst for growth. You start to understand that the things that break you open are often the very things that allow light to enter. Pain can either shrink you or expand you. It depends on whether you choose to see it as the end or as the beginning of something new. When you resist your pain, you stay trapped in it. But when you face it, when you lean into it, when you allow it to teach you, it stops being your enemy and becomes your ally. That's what resilience is. Not the absence of pain, but the ability to turn it into purpose. Think about it. Every person you admire didn't become great because they avoided difficulty. They became great because they confronted it. They learned to transmute suffering into strength, loss into clarity, fear into faith. That's what transformation through trials truly means. It's the realization that nothing that happens to you has the power to define you unless you surrender your identity to it. You are not your failure. You are not your trauma. You are not your mistakes. You are the consciousness learning through them. But transformation is rarely linear. It's messy, unpredictable, and uncomfortable. You'll be tempted to quit 1,000 times. You'll want to go back to what feels familiar, even if it was hurting you, because familiarity is seductive. Growth asks you to step into the unknown, to let go of who you were, and that can feel like death. But the truth is, what's dying is not you, it's the version of you that can't survive in the next chapter. Pain becomes the midwife of your rebirth. The old self resists, it clings, it pleads for the comfort of the known, but the deeper self, the one aligned with truth, knows that transformation is worth the chaos. And then comes the moment you least expect, the divine reversal, the shift that makes you realize none of the pain was wasted. You see, when God turns things around, He doesn't just restore what was lost, He redefines it. What once seemed like ruin becomes revelation. The doors that closed weren't denials, they were redirections. The people who left weren't rejections, they were releases. The job you lost wasn't the end. It was an invitation to rediscover your purpose. The heartbreak that shattered you wasn't punishment. It was preparation for deeper love. But you can only see this once you've endured the process, once your perception has been purified by pain. We often think of divine turnaround as something external, a sudden blessing, a stroke of luck, a miracle that changes our circumstances. And yes, sometimes it looks like that. But more often, the turnaround begins within you, long before it appears outside you. It's the shift in consciousness that takes place when you stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, how is this shaping me? That's the seed of reversal. The point where your mindset changes from victimhood to vision. You stop seeing the world as something that's against you and start seeing it as something that's guiding you. The divine reversal doesn't erase the past, it redeems it. It turns what was meant to destroy you into the very foundation that strengthens you. Every scar becomes a symbol of survival, every wound becomes wisdom, every delay becomes direction. And when you look back, you realize something extraordinary. The things that felt like losses were actually transitions. They were necessary dismantlings, clearing space for something greater to emerge. Because the truth is, you can't receive the new if your hands are still clinging to the old. When that turnaround comes, it won't just change your circumstances, it will change your identity. You'll no longer define yourself by your pain, but by your perseverance. You'll carry a kind of quiet authority, born not from arrogance, but from having walked through fire and emerged whole. You'll no longer need to prove yourself, because your presence will testify to what you've endured. That's the gift of divine reversal. It gives meaning to the meaningless, order to the chaos, and purpose to the pain. But understand this, divine reversals don't happen by accident. They happen by alignment. They occur when you stop fighting the process and start flowing with it. You can't rush it. You can't manipulate it. You can only prepare yourself for it. Preparation means cleaning the inner space, releasing resentment, forgiving what hurt you, surrendering the need to understand everything. It means trusting that even when you can't see progress, something sacred is still unfolding. There's a law in life that mirrors physics. Pressure reveals potential, and release creates momentum. The greater the compression, the more powerful the expansion when it's time to rise. That's why those who have suffered deeply often carry the greatest wisdom. They've learned the rhythm of contraction and release. They've learned that the same life that breaks you will also rebuild you if you let it. They've stopped asking for easy lives and started praying for strength to face the one they have. And here's the beauty. You don't need to see the whole turnaround to trust it's happening. You just need to stay in motion. Transformation requires endurance. Divine reversal requires faith. You'll know it's coming not by the absence of problems, but by the presence of peace in the middle of them. That's when you'll sense it, the subtle shift, the quiet confidence that whispers, I'm not losing, I'm being positioned. Life will begin to mirror that belief. The very situations that once triggered you will no longer control you. The opportunities you thought were gone will reappear in better form. The relationships that align with your higher purpose will naturally find their way back. It won't be forced, it will flow. And you'll realize that God never turned away from you. He was simply turning anew toward what was meant for you all along. So when you're walking through pressure, when life feels unbearable, when it seems everything you knew is falling apart, don't curse it. Don't run from it. Let it refine you. Let it build the strength, the clarity, and the faith that the divine reversal will require. Because the moment you begin to see pain as preparation and pressure as purpose, the turnaround has already begun. Not somewhere out there, but right here within you, in the unseen place where faith becomes reality and your story starts to make sense in ways it never has before.